Okay. Welcome, team. My name is Josh Mohan. So it looks like we've got participants that are coming in now. So thank you all for joining today's discussion. I'm going to be letting in a few more folks as well. But thank you all for joining today. Hopefully everybody's staying safe through this winter storm that we've had. We're down in Texas, so we've been a little bit chilly, trying to manage that. But today we're excited to talk you through how TalentGuard is working with HR and specifically how we're influencing HR technology along those lines. So before I get started, just a couple housekeeping items that I wanted to run through. We are going to be recording this demo. There will be a downloadable form. We'll also follow up with a deck as well that we're going to be going through today. All participants are going to be muted in today's call. We will, however, open up the forum for questions in the last 10 minutes or so. So feel free to hold your questions until then. Again, we're excited to get started. So I'm going to first kick us off just with a quick intros on our end. My name is Josh Mohan. I'm part of the sales team here at TalentGuard. Really excited to kind of listen to Frank and talking through some of the influence that our product team is doing specifically with HR and our platform today. Frank, I'll hand to you and let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Frank Janak here. I'm the CTO and co-founder of TalentGuard, and I lead the product team as well as something called TalentGuard Labs, where we focus on research and applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning to solving complex talent management problems.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. And Frank, just want to confirm you have my screen in front of you and it's all good. I'm going to move forward here in a second.
Good.
Awesome. Great. Well, for those that aren't familiar with TalentGuard, I want to just quickly do an introduction on TalentGuard as a whole. Our focus is specifically in workforce intelligence. We've designed an enterprise solution that focuses on managing job and skills architecture and how that influences your talent management strategy. Today, what we want to really focus on is specifically our breakthrough in the digital skills management and how we think about doing that with AI, machine learning, and automation. But the reason that we've started in this particular space and want to kind of chat through some of these investments that we've made over the past couple of years is specifically to address the challenges that we're seeing happen across all organizations that we're talking to. So it's no secret that we've got a rapidly changing environment. This is driven off of AI. This is driven off of advancement in artificial intelligence, digital transformation, things like that, right? That are creating challenges for HR leaders and business leaders to manage their employee population and manage the skills and jobs that they have today. And what we're seeing on our end from the businesses that we engage with and our customers today is this is creating a really challenging moment, right, where engagement is potentially low, retention is challenging, employees just simply don't know where to go. What does their role consist of? How do they evolve? In taking the next steps within their particular career. And so for us, one of the things that we've seen and we believe to be a root cause issue of this is the lack of a system that is fully automated, that's built on skills and competencies that can be dynamically used to go integrate with the talent management strategy to be more strategic and for the business to better understand what skills do we have? How do we leverage those skills, right? How, as a manufacturing company today, do I transition from a particular business unit into this electrical vehicle world that we're now starting to live in? Those are some of the questions that we're trying to answer with our customers today. So again, Frank is going to walk you through how we're positioning our AI within the product and how we want to go leverage that. We believe the market is at a really exciting inflection point, and we're looking forward to continuing to invest and to help reshape the way that people think about talent management. And so, Frank, I'm going to hand to you to start walking through, how we're thinking about this from an AI perspective.
All right, thanks, Josh. And will you advance the slides for me?
You got it.
This next slide, please. Okay, great. So, we're at a point now where AI is starting to dominate not just the news, but our thinking in terms of how we approach problems in the HR talent management space. We all know that HR systems exist that implement complex workflows and automate various aspects of human capital management, the tasks that we perform on a day-to-day basis. And we also know that without these systems, many of these tasks are so complex that we would, and the amount of data that we're working with is so vast that we wouldn't be able to achieve any of these tasks or be able to execute on any of these tasks without such systems. Most of these, though, can be easily, or not easily, but at least fulfilled by classic programming approaches, to workflow management and automation, and don't necessarily need artificial intelligence. But where does artificial intelligence and machine learning help us in other areas, either to either automate or perform tasks that can't be performed through conventional means? So things that have to do with more either they're computationally intractable, so they're beyond the ability of classic programming techniques to solve, or they may have some aspect of non-determinism, so more probabilistic in nature. And so these types of problems are where AI and machine learning applied uses of those techniques become very, very helpful and effective. The key here is that you need to keep in mind that we're dealing with humans, right? And human beings are suspicious of automation in general, but also of AI and machine learning, and turning their careers, their livelihood, and such over to AI is not something I don't think anyone is going to raise their hand and say, "Yep, I'm ready for that." So we sort of have to approach this from that perspective of to make sure that we keep the human and human resources, even though we're leveraging these tools and technologies. So moving on to the next slide, there are. Thanks, Josh. I'm going to talk a bit about the capabilities and limitations of AI. And rather than, the field is vast, the number of problems that we're trying to solve with AI and machine learning is quite vast. But there is one thing that all of us seem to have some experience with and have some knowledge of, and that's ChatGPT. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT specifically, but also in general more about large language models and the underlying technology of ChatGPT, which is the GPT-4 model, and talk a little bit about its capabilities, but also its limitations and some of the things that we need to be aware of, and how we can optimize its use as we think about applying these in the context of HR. So starting with that, I thought it'd be useful for me to walk through a specific example of TalentGuard applying the GPT models to solve a particular task. And the task at hand was to update 3,000 book learning references that we had tied to individual skills within our skills taxonomy. And these learning references, these books, had been identified over the years as great resources to help close gaps, skill gaps specifically. And in maintaining that list of 3,000 and keeping those up to date manually is one of those problems. It's very difficult to do. It's sort of beyond conventional programming means to update that automatically. And so there's an element of subjectivity and non-determinism involved here, and it seemed to be a really perfect case for attempting to apply, anyway, AI machine learning techniques to solve this problem. So to quote a former professor of mine at Georgia Tech, he always said, when you're starting off on solving an AI problem, do the easy thing first. Well, what's the easy thing to do here? And it's the thing that everyone does. Just go to ChatGPT, literally go to ChatGPT, provide it with context, information about the skill, and ask it to, through careful prompt engineering, to identify learning resources that would be useful to help employees who may have gaps in their skills to close those gaps. And so we iterated over those 3,000 references. Again, a very carefully curated prompt and a crafted prompt. And and at the end, it produced a list of thousands of references, complete with title, description, author, ISBN number, year of publication, publication house, et cetera, everything you would see in a normal citation. And then, of course, being who we are, we weren't going to just blindly accept that information or that data, and we checked everything. And so as we started working through it, we discovered that 90% of those recommendations, those resources, were completely made up. The titles was no book by that title, or there was a book by that title, but the ISBN was made up. Who published it, the year it was published, the description didn't match the actual book, and so you might think, okay, great example of model hallucination or hallucinations that you're all, I'm sure, familiar with at this point. But what does that mean? Does that mean you just can't trust it because it hallucinated and there's no way we're going to be able to make use of this at all? Well, it turns out that although it does suffer from that hallucination problem, it's actually pretty good at, the model is actually pretty good at identifying subjects or topics given a book title and a book description. So starting with the original book title and the original book description, asking the model to infer what topics may be covered by that particular book, and what subjects, to use that to then use an external source of truth, like an ISBN catalog or another database. There's the Library of Congress, but there's also other sources of this data. Google Books is a great example. They have a great an API and a way to query based on book subjects and such. And sort of now taking that hybrid approach of marrying the model and taking advantage of its strengths to a source of truth, we're grounding the model in reality. And when we took that approach, we were able to get about 95% accuracy. So 95% of the time, we're actually producing a real book, with a matching text, a title, a description, ISBN, all the parts matched. And we were able, because of our connection to these various data sources and having the proper ISBN, we're able to then construct a link that lets the user of our system go directly to that resource and purchase it, whether it's on Google Play or Amazon or wherever the case is, making that very streamlined. And so now we have in place a way to then keep this information up to date. So we're constantly automatically validating it and updating it. So that is, so Josh, actually, if you can advance to the next slide, I sort of went already into the topic of model hallucinations and what are some of the risks. So of course, if we just blindly accepted the output and said, hey, to our employees, here's the 3 things, or here's the 5 or 10 books you should go read in order to close the skill gaps that we've identified through our talent assessment, well, I think they'd be quite upset when they figured out, hey, these aren't real books. So, then, suddenly they wouldn't be trusting the data, they wouldn't be trusting the models, they wouldn't be trusting the application, they wouldn't be trusting you as their leader. So it's really important that we're, and this kind of goes back to my comment earlier about human in the loop. It's super important that no matter what we task AI or machine learning to do, that there's always a human expert who's reviewing and verifying that the information that's produced is in fact accurate and true. It's not full of mistruths and such. And you can sort of take this idea, this case study or example that I just walked through, and apply it to anything, any task where we might use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and we have to be aware of some of the same types of issues that can arise, and there's other approaches and techniques that we can use. And we don't have enough time to go through all of them, but if you, but we're happy to provide additional information after the webinar to give you some more insights into the different types of things that we've discovered and some approaches that we've taken to make sure that what we're producing is ultimately going to optimize, the use of HR and start to establish something called trust, right? We all know about trust, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to trust what the AI machine learning is doing, and we want our employees to feel to trust it as well. And so that's all part of that big equation. Next slide. The other big concern in artificial intelligence machine learning applications is data privacy and security. I hear this all the time. Josh hears this all the time when he's talking to prospective customers and even existing customers as we roll out new features and functionality around AI and machine learning. And so there's lots of headlines out there about language models like ChatGPT and others that are kind of memorizing the data that they're being trained on, and in some cases exposing confidential information, maybe about a person or a company or even something, anything that's sensitive or private, someone's medical records, things of that nature. And those are real concerns, and those are areas where researchers are spending a lot of time to figure out how can we reduce that. And there are a number of approaches that can be taken to reduce that. But there's one thing I want to kind of talk about here is, in addition to just the concerns about it, we also have to worry about the regulations, not worry about, but comply with the regulations that are emerging that are designed to help protect data and privacy, and human privacy in particular. We're all familiar with the GDPR. And I won't, there's a lot to the GDPR, but the one thing that we do spend a lot of time thinking about when it comes to GDPR in the context of AI is Article 22, which is called the profiling regulation. And just to quote, this is where the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing. So in the context of GDPR, any HR tech that you're using in your organization that's making decisions that are based solely on automatic processing is actually forbidden by Article 22. And that law is in effect. And that law is something that's enforceable. And so that's something you have to be concerned about when you're thinking about HR technologies that you're looking at or using within your organization. You really need to be thinking about Article 22. And the other part of that, Article 22, is the right to obtain human intervention on the part of the controller to express his or her point of view and to contest the decision. And so in the case of an employee who is aware that a decision was made, whether it maybe could be about their compensation, it could be about their performance or their potential rather within the organization, or maybe a role as a successor in a role, that sort of thing. If a decision was made that is a negative for that particular employee, they have a right to, they can demand that you as the employer, they can contest that decision and demand that you explain to them exactly why they weren't promoted. And so at that point, you have an obligation, whether you develop the technology or not, you have an obligation to then explain how the AI that you use came to that decision. And so that's something that's to keep in mind too as you're thinking about these technologies. The other one that I want to talk a little bit about is the EU AI Act. And that we're still a couple, 2 to 3 years out before that goes into full effect. But it's like the GDPR, the EU AI Act is likely going to become the template for, or the model for, other similar laws across the globe in other countries. But they define 4 categories of risk. One is at the very top is unacceptable risk. So things like applications of AI and machine learning that manipulate human behavior. That is forbidden, banned. You can't deploy it. And also using social scoring is another thing that's banned. There's something called high risk, and this is anything that's crucial to safety, like healthcare, transportation, but also, and this is really important for us as HR folks, is anything that affects a person's legal or employment status. That automatically places that application that uses AI into a high risk category. And the legal requirement is going to be that it requires strict compliance and transparency. And then there's a couple other categories. I won't read them all to you, but that's one in particular. Well, I'll read one more. Limited risk is the next one down, moving from a high risk to the low risk, limited risk. And anything that interacts with people, like a chatbot, it has to be, the human using it has to be made aware that they're interacting with a machine. So you can never deploy something that's, that where you try to fool a person. For example, let's say you had a career coach chatbot. If you presented that as, hey, there's a human being behind this who's going to provide you career advice or mentoring and such, and you don't disclose to the employee that is actually AI, you're violating the law in this limited risk thing. And so transparency is another thing that's called out as a requirement. And then there's minimal risk, things like games and spam filters and such. So the one thing that is unclear right now is how large language models are going to be affected by this particular act. The act was originally written before the language models came out, and now language models being as powerful as they are and having many different types of applications, there are going to be a special set of rules around that too. So my main thing here is just keep an eye on that sort of thing. These are all things that you should be aware of as a user of HR technology, as a buyer of HR technology, or if you're on this call and you make AI technology for HR tech. These are things you all need to be aware about. And so navigating compliance. And then as far as the implementation of safe and secure AI systems and AR operations, ultimately, at the end of the day, this really depends on human oversight. And all of these regulations, the EU Act, GDPR, they all require human oversight. So one of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations is, will these technologies replace HR professionals within the workplace? And the short answer is, well, the answer is, it will definitely change roles. It'll change what's required to perform particular roles within HR. It will also require the development of new skills in certain HR roles. But at the end of the day, people and humans, and especially human resources personnel, are going to be critical to make sure that organizations are in compliance with these types of regulations and laws. And also, well, that's sort of the key point. So I think that's all I wanted to cover, Josh.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Frank.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think, for those that are on the call today, Frank has obviously walked through a lot of different areas where we've got different pieces of collateral that we can kind of go deeper on in terms of privacy and some of the hallucination and some of the capabilities and limitations, right? But I think what's important, from my point of view, specifically within this space, is just understanding the complexity, nuance, and some of the challenges, that are in the market today from an HR technology perspective, but also the intentionality and thoughtfulness that we're trying to put into as we think about product and how we're wanting to evolve the product over time, right? There's a thoughtfulness that's going to be required there to advance. So Frank, really appreciate that context. I think, as we talked a little bit earlier in the presentation about the challenges and again, how AI is starting to influence the overall trajectory of HR technology. What we thought we would do is talk a little bit about how we are advancing our platform to go embrace that challenge, right? So what I'm going to do is just walk through a couple steps of how the product's designed today from an architecture perspective, and then we'll get into some demos that will discuss some of this further. I think the first thing to really understand about TalentGuard is when we engage with a customer or a future customer, we are thinking about this in stages, right? The first stage is going to be what we call automate. This is where we're going to do an analysis of your business. We're going to take the job roles that exist. We're going to leverage skills that you may have already or potentially leverage our skills. And this is some of the workforce GPT things that Frank has talked about, where our library and our data library, where we're putting a lot of effort from an AI perspective, can go bring an automated version and accelerate your time to value from a business standpoint. We typically see this being a really long, cumbersome process with organizations as they think about their job architecture and how they're going to go enable that. Typically, they come to us and they've said, "Hey, look, we've done a lot of manual work here. We're fed up with that. How do we think about taking this on in a more automated fashion?" So that's where we, start the conversation. From there, we're putting you in a position where you can start driving engagement across the business. And what we mean by that is once your job architecture is complete and we've used AI to enforce that acceleration, we can now toggle on our system where employees can go self-assess the skills that are required. They can point to specific development plans. Our AI will tee up different career paths that they may go match to based off of the skills that they have. And all of that data, as we continue to pull those interactions off of an employee and a manager and back and forth, we then start to put the business in a position to go start optimizing how it thinks about talent. And what I mean by that is, look, maybe there's a business unit today that we need to go reskill, right? There's a new transformation that's happening. I used the example earlier on a manufacturing customer of ours who's going through this EV transition. Well, we want to do that quickly, right? So how do we ensure that we understand how we're reskilling people? Got to have the right skills, and thus we've built the foundation. And so another way to think about this is really what we call a funnel of talent, right? We start in this automate stage, and this is just a little bit more detailed view of what we're looking at. But the idea is that we can put you in a position where we have a foundation for the business in terms of how it's thinking about managing that skills architecture across the business today. And so once that's in place, we then can start engaging where we're going back to that assessment and development and those career paths. But then from a business perspective, again, to reemphasize this point, we can have a better understanding of our internal talent, how we're monitoring performance, compliance monitoring that Frank touched on as well. But again, we can feel very comfortable with the decisions we've made, how we've tracked along some of this progress from an automation perspective, and the feedback and results that we can get as a business. And so this for us today, what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the webinar on the back half of our 30 minutes together is going to be specifically with automate, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that design component of how we build out that process. And once we have that process done, our goal is to put you as a business in this position where you can start defining a really clear workflow for the employee population and for the business as a whole, right? We put you where you can have the lens of there's your intelligent role studio, which again is our architecture and our data library that we're managing. And we can start putting these employees in a position where they can self-assess, get feedback, have different development plans that they can assign themselves to as they grow within their career. And again, start infusing AI along career pathing and succession planning. So really excited about some of the progress that we've made with the product along this journey. Frank, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add here before I kind of chat through our agenda for taking a look at the product. Might be on mute. No worries. All right, so where I'm going to be focusing the discussion today is we're going to specifically be looking at this talent frameworks. And how we leverage the data library that we have right now, along with looking at our product, which is going to be the Intelligent Role Studio. So just for some context.
Sorry, Josh.
Oh, go ahead, Frank.
Sorry, I don't use Zoom every day. I'm a Teams guy, as you know, so it took me a second to find that.
All good.
Yeah, I'd love to just talk a few minutes about Workforce GPT before you jump into frameworks and Role Studio.
For sure. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned language models and such earlier, and some of the things to be concerned about. Well, one of the areas of research that we've done is how can we focus a model to perform very specific tasks and then string those together to create a whole. And so as an approach, rather than attempt to have a model do everything at once, is how can we refine that and break it down into individual steps to get a better result. And so, through our research, we found that you could sit down at ChatGPT and say, build me a role, or here's an example of a role taxonomy. Now build me a role for role X. And it will faithfully construct something. But when you look at it more closely, you realize that it's not quite right. The description may be more aligned with a description for a job posting, rather than something that can be used in a talent management context for talent assessment, for example, or career path building and such. So there are some differences between those. And in some cases, it'll make things up within the description. So it'll sound good, and most of it might be right, but there are parts of it that won't be. And then the same for, as you sort of break that down, let's say, for example, in your taxonomy, you have 20 skills per role as sort of a minimum. So you ask, in that carefully crafted prompt that you engineered, you ask ChatGPT to identify the top 20, top 10 technical skills, top 10 soft skills for that particular role. In that case, it's more than likely going to make up a lot of it. So you'll see things that look pretty reasonable, but as you dig into it, you'll find a lot of things really don't apply to that particular role. And then take it even further down into like TalentGuard does. Josh is going to talk about this in a minute about the depth of our taxonomy and the talent frameworks, is taking it down to the behavioral indicator levels across 4 levels of proficiency. And again, you're going to see a lot of hallucination in that sort of, if you take that approach, just taking the out of the box ChatGPT model. And so how do we overcome that with Workforce GPT? We actually break it down into individual tasks, starting with, when we construct a role, if you think about how an expert would construct a role piece by piece, from defining the role itself, the role title, not the title, but rather the description of the role, the major responsibilities for that role, then identifying the skills, then kind of taking those down to the proficiency levels, and sort of a step-by-step process. We take the same approach, but what we've done is we've done 2 things. We've fine-tuned with the model, each of those models to perform each of those tasks. We fine-tuned it with our own data we've been collecting over the last 10 years, and data from our own talent frameworks to fine-tune those models to perform exceptionally well at those tasks. So rather than a 10% accuracy like we saw in the example of earning references, our accuracy is in the 95+% for those individual tasks. And how do we know that? Because we have human experts verify everything. Again, back to what is HR's role in the future? Organizational development experts that understand, what makes a good role definition, the role description, responsibilities, and so on, are part of that process of vetting. And then anything that we learn through that process, things that weren't quite right, we feed that back into our model fine-tuning across those tasks. The other thing that we do, which is incredibly important, I mentioned earlier too when I was talking about learning references, is model grounding. In the case of grounding, we need to be able to look at a source of truth for what skills are relevant for that particular role right now, based on current labor market data. So we do have relationship with Lightcast, and I'm sure you're all familiar with them. If not, they used to be called MZ and Burning Glass. They merged and renamed themselves to Lightcast. We also have, the government-provided labor market data and some other sources from around the world that we use to help us anchor the tasks related to this construction of skills, so that we know that when the model produces a role, the skills that it's identified are skills that came from live labor market data and not something the model learned 2 years ago after being trained on mountains of data. So that combination of things has allowed us to produce complete role taxonomies that go all the way down to the 4 levels of proficiency and behavioral indicators across 20 skills at a 95+% accuracy level. And again, that's vetted not just by our own internal experts, but our customers who we are producing these role architectures for. So that's the background on Workforce GPT.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, maybe say one more thing.
Right.
I know I don't want to burn up all of our time, but the other big advantage to doing to this approach is that we reduce the time it takes to construct a role, say a job family of roles, from weeks or months down to literally minutes. And so the models, Workforce GPT is able to produce a complete job role from our job role title and some context information within 2 to 3 minutes. And again, the output is within 95+% accuracy. And so huge savings. Anyway, that's it, Josh.
No, I appreciate that. That's the right point to make there. So yeah, very encouraging progress in terms of how we're thinking about that Workforce GPT being layered into the talent frameworks and Intelligent Role Studio. And so, just in the interest of time, I'm gonna toggle over to our Intelligent Role Studio. Maybe Frank, if you want to add some commentary on how some of the Workforce GPT is influencing that today, that would be great. But I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and pull up this other.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things while you're teeing that up. So when Workforce GPT produces a role, we directly publish the role to our Intelligent Role Studio, and this is where that vetting process starts. And so Josh is going to talk about some of that functionality here in a second. But within the Intelligent Role Studio, that's where the governance, that's where the review and the governance takes place. It's also where the deployment of roles in this data takes place when, as far as readying it for assignment to the workforce. And then from there, it drives all the functionality of TalentGuard. So at the heart of all this is that data. That data is sort of the key to every facet of TalentGuard. And so there you go, Josh.
Awesome. Perfect. And can you see my screen okay?
I can see it.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, to Frank's point, when we think about, kind of what we've been just talking through, right? Again, the design from a product perspective, we want to go manage this data in what we call our intelligent role studio. So kind of the way to think about this is the library of content, of skills, roles, how we're going to go manage those roles, how we're going to go calibrate those roles. We can get much more advanced in terms of building out different career progressions on the back end. But what we're looking at is specifically how an admin or an HR business partner would be operating the system. This would not be employee facing. We would be working hand in hand with you as an organization if this was something that you elected to partner with us on. But the idea here, I'm going to quickly go through this. We can obviously get much more technical if there's any folks who want to have a follow-up discussion. But kind of the short and sweet of it is we've got this dashboard that shows how many roles, how many published roles are in the infrastructure today. If I want to go manage my library, what that means is this is where I'm going to go manage the skills that are across all roles within my organization today. And so Frank talked a little bit about that, how Workforce GPT is going to drive the growth of that and these skills that would show up and how we could go look at the detail behind them. So let's take a particular skill, just A/B testing right now. We'll start to see information that we can go see, like a skill title, skill description. We can tie out different development opportunities to a particular skill that an employee would see. We can add in behavioral statements, bring in indicators levels, all that good stuff. So there's a lot of depth that we can provide behind those skills. And again, if you think about some of the acceleration that Workforce GPT can do on new skills that you're building, this is a lot of manual work that folks have typically done through maybe a spreadsheet in the past. And this is a huge time savings and gives an opportunity for significant scale for the business. Additionally, I can start to think about, let's say that I've aligned the skills that I need for my business today. I want to start thinking about the roles that we have across the business. So I can come into the system and I can bring in just a list of roles. And the way that we would do this is, let's just give an example here, where I have a particular role that I'm going to upload into the system. And what's going to happen is again, kind of on the back end with our AI is going to take that role. We are going to show you the role that you brought in over on the left. And then our system is going to scan our library in essence, and then come back and give match percentages based off of the role name, potentially a role ID, grade, job description, or role description. There's a lot of other data that we can add into here, but we'll also come up with the skills, right? So think about the skills that we were just looking in the library today. We're in essence saying, hey, you have a role. We think that it could be filled out significantly more based off of what our AI is showing right now. And that is something that you can then go align and set that role as kind of the new role in essence that you would be leveraging across the business today. And so once that process is done, we then would have the ability to go manage the roles. So again, kind of in recap, we've looked at the skill library. We've then taken roles that are in our business. We've used AI to go enhance the skills that are acquired across those particular roles. And then I can go start to review and approve the roles below. So once I want to take a role like this strategy consultant, I could expand this particular role. And you'll see the depth that would be behind this particular title right now. And so we could have responsibilities, skills added. We could add in additional qualifications, experiences, preferences. Again, you don't have to go this level of depth, but we give that optionality within the product for how folks could potentially leverage something along these lines. And then in terms of thinking about calibrating the roles, the last thing that I want to show here is, let's say that you want to start building out an actual calibration. We can take particular job families and start to build. Let's take one like purchasing, for instance. And what we can do is look at a particular published roles and calibrate the roles that we've designed. So going back to this step-by-step process, we look at the skills, we have the roles, we've now finalized the roles that we want to produce along with the skills that we want to go make public to an organization. So I could potentially take some of these procurement roles that we have right now. And in the background, we're basically going to go put these roles side by side and then calibrate based off of their particular grade, right? So we can show that, maybe a more junior role will have more basic skill level as it pertains to accounting, where this may be more advanced for a particular promotion. But the idea for us is that we can go anchor on a particular role that we can go build and calibrate future roles and career paths in the future based off of what's been designed from the skills and jobs. So I'm going to pause there. Frank, I don't know if there's anything else that you just want to add of what I went through briefly, just to talk through how some of the AI layers over this as well.
Just to point out that some of the examples and things that Josh was talking about are not language model AI, are not related to language model AI. The field of AI machine learning is vast. The number and types of algorithms that we have at our disposal is vast. And the trick is the key is, not trick so much, but the key is to identify the best algorithm for the job. So we're using and employing different algorithms. And in every case where we're employing it, we can explain what we're doing and how it's making decisions, kind of going back to, hey, if we make a decision that's based on some AI algorithm, can we also show or explain how we arrived at that decision? So that's really important. So that's probably the only thing I want to mention at this point.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate that context. The last thing, just to quickly show the group on the call today, is I do want to show, once we've done this work on the back end, what is the outcome, right? What does that look like once we publish to an employee? And this is just a quick view. There's a lot more, obviously, that we can demo. But I think the key thing, just in terms of the discussion today, is specifically looking at the assessment piece. So if you were to go look at a role that we had published and we had put out as this finance specialist 2 role, for instance, this would be a view that I, as an employee, Jonathan, would have in terms of the skills that are required to my particular role. So that process that we just went to, we're building all of that back end, and we're basically saying, there's a finance specialist 2 role. Here are the skills that are going to be required across that particular role. And then I, as an employee, can go self-assess, submit to my manager, build development plans from there, and so on and so forth. But again, this is the outcome that we're trying to create to go start to drive some of those business insights on what skills individuals have across the company today. And some of the outcome I think that's worth also calling out here is, if you think about some of these skills as a whole, we can go in and actually look at some of the depth that's going to be behind the skills that we brought over to each particular role. So you can see that we've built out proficiency levels that would be behind that particular role and skill, and then also the action plan, which would go tie back to development plan. Again, I know I'm putting a lot out there for those that are looking at this, and I'm happy to come back and show this to others that are interested and get a little bit more into the weeds. But I think it's important just to understand, when we talk about skill management and we think about the architecture, it's a complex problem that I think that we've brought a lot of simplicity and elegant solution to. How do you go manage those skills today? And then how do you understand where your employees are? And again, use that to go drive some of the business's decisions and investments long-term. Awesome. So I am going to quickly show just a couple more slides. Let me pull this up real quick, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So And I think we've covered a little bit more of this, Frank. I don't know if there's any other context that you want to add here, but let me make sure that you guys can see me. Can you see my screen okay still?
Yeah.
Excellent. I didn't know if there's anything else that you wanted to cover here as well, Frank.
I think we touched on a lot of these, yeah, unless someone has a specific question.
Awesome. And then you touched on this too, but this again, we'll share this deck back out with people. But just in terms of what you're looking at as well, if we think about a lot of the conversations that we're having with customers and prospects across the board, and if you think about where people are spending time, this view right here is the manual effort that typically takes an FTE to work through. Building a job, collecting data, analysis of the work duty, working with SMEs and leaders, HR business partners to sign off on this. Everything that anyone on the call is aware of. And what we're trying to do is to reduce that human effort by 80%, right? And replace some of that with AI, and then put people in a position where they can start looking at some of the other data that is going to be driven by the usage across employees and managers. So from an ROI viewpoint, this is going to easily 12x your job descriptions created and accelerate this whole process. We've seen some pretty significant changes with organizations where we have one customer that was working on a project like this for a couple of years, and they've come over to our solution because it was taking too long, and by the time they were getting done with the work, they're realizing some of the work was out of date, and we've been able to fast track that over just the last couple months alone. So really exciting in terms of what we're doing here. And sorry, Frank, did you have something you want to add there? Thought I heard a question.
Oh, no.
Cool. And then, for us, this final, output that we want to put people in a position is to just start to understand their enterprise skills at a high level, right? How do we think about who has what skills across an entire organization? Not just a region or an office, but an entire organization where we can know where we want to invest future L&D dollars, where we want to potentially reskill different groups. These are all things that are, highly important and really why we want to go make that investment, as a business into thinking about TalentGuard as a partner. So that in conclusion is a wrap in terms of what Frank and I are planning on covering today. Additionally, we have some AI resources that we can share with the team that will be in the deck. There's additionally, you can reach out to TalentGuard if you have any other follow-up questions or want to set up a follow-up call. But now I'll open it up for Q&A. If anybody has a question, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. And feel free to send questions to me directly. It looks like I just got one. So Frank, one of the you mentioned transparency multiple times, and what do you mean by that? I guess is the question here. When you talk about that transparency.
Yeah, so basically it just means the ability to trace explain essentially how AI models arrived at a decision. Right? So I talked about that in a couple of different places. One of the key things in these laws like the EU AI Act are that you need to, and even GDPR in Article 22, is that if you're using AI and it's affecting a person, then you have to be able to explain how the AI arrived at that decision. And so just to use an example, let's say that you as an organization decided, I don't need any of this complex fancy stuff that TalentGuard has. I can just use ChatGPT. And you start feeding ChatGPT with questions, say data about a person, and then questions about their readiness to progress to the next job role. And that recommendation, or maybe let me take something a little more extreme. You have two people and you have to choose one over the other to move into a promotion, into a higher role. And you choose one over the other. Well, if the person who didn't get the job may come to you or will likely come to you and say, hey, how come I didn't do it? And you can't just say, well, because ChatGPT decided, that you were not the right candidate, the other person was the best candidate. And then of course their next question is going to be, well, why? How did it come to that conclusion? And so that's actually something that's pretty difficult to answer. But the answer that question that employee is posing, because at the end of the day, what ChatGPT is, the large language model, all the language model does is it predicts the next best word in a sequence. I mean, just to boil it down to what it does really well. So it's been trained on a bunch of stuff on this corpus of data, and it learns that if I start a sentence with Jack and Jill, and then ask it to complete that sentence, it'll likely come up with Jack and Jill ran off the hill, because that's something it saw and it learned, in its training phase. So I can explain, with confidence that it picked, the next word with a certain degree of probability because of the training data, but I can't point back to the training data that influenced it at all. And on top of that, it's not really making any kind of decision, right? It's just looking at what I presented, the data I gave it, and deciding what's the next best sequence of words. And it could have chosen the other person simply because, given its training data, the probability of words to choose next just happened to be that other person was the higher probability. It has nothing to do with that person's background or their skills or experience or anything like that. So it's, at the end of the day, if you're applying, and this is something a vendor should be able to explain to you, right? If you're buying HR technology that has AI or machine learning of any kind embedded in it, and those applications are affecting some outcome that affects a human being, then that vendor should be able to explain with accuracy and precision exactly how it's making its decisions. And if you accept that and you think that's the right way to make those decisions, and you feel like if you were ever put in a position where you had to defend a decision, then then that's probably a reasonably good application. But that's what I mean by transparency. Is you've got to essentially you have to be able to explain how the AI came up with its answer.
That's awesome. One other question that came through was just the company works with a lot of sensitive information, and it seems that there's a lot of risks with using something like ChatGPT. Should they ban the use of that at their company?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it really does depend. If you're a government agency dealing with top secret data, yes, it's probably the short answer. I'm not sure that I would use it. And that's mainly because of the way these models work and the way they're trained and the way they're refined. For example, if you look at OpenAI, anyone who uses the OpenAI's API, where instead of typing a prompt in at the ChatGPT interface, you're actually sending a prompt to the API. Through the way they fine-tune models is they actually collect all the prompts. This is something OpenAI does. They collect all the prompts that are being sent to them, and then they have human beings out there that are randomly being asked, or they're not randomly being asked, but they are being presented with a random sampling of those prompts and asked to produce an answer, a human answer, and they use that human answer to compare it to what the model produced, and then through a process of reinforcement learning algorithms and such, they're able to choose the best or find the best solution or answer to that prompt, and then that goes back into model fine tuning. So anyway, someone's going to see that original prompt at some point. With ChatGPT, I don't know that they use prompts from ChatGPT unless, and there is one caveat with ChatGPT, if you have history turned on. So you can turn history on and off with ChatGPT, have it remember everything you asked it to do. If you have history turned on, you're basically agreeing to let them use those prompts for training. And so that's something to be very, very aware of. You may have people in your organization that are dealing with sensitive data that are using ChatGPT in ways that I explained are probably not very good use cases of it, like doing someone's performance assessment or comparing two people's performance to decide who to promote. that those prompts may be full of confidential and sensitive data that you don't ever want to get out. And so, so in those, in those scenarios, you may want to do that, or in an engineering organization where they're dealing with sensitive intellectual property, and they're trying to maybe come up with some way of describing something, and they're feeding in that intellectual property into ChatGPT. So there's lots of cautions about using it, but I don't think I would go to the extreme of saying you should ban it. But if you're going to allow it, then you should, without question, be educating your workforce about how to use it in a way that's going to be safe, for the data that you're using. So. Yeah.
Fair enough. I just use it for cooking recipes. So, that's what we're doing now. But
writing poetry.
Writing poetry, yes. Well, very good. Well, it looks like the last question that came through is just any follow-up in terms of folks reaching out to us if they had any questions. So we'll be sharing the deck, like I said earlier, that you can reach out to info@talentguard.com. And then you can also go online and book a demo through our website. And we'll have our emails as well. So there'll be contact information that will be followed up. So thank you all very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Frank, thank you for taking time to chat through this with us. Is helpful and insightful. And appreciate the time, everyone.
Welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.